Hi, welcome to this little overview slash tutorial of Quick Render Preset add-on for Blender. We're gonna go over how to use it, talk about what does it do, what does it not do, and how to install it. And we're gonna go ahead with installation. If you know how to install Blender add-ons, you can skip this part, or if you just wanna learn how the add-on works, you can skip to a later section of the video. But let's go ahead with the installation. And just to note, this is a 4.1 version. If you're on 4.2, the UI has changed a little. So I suggest you consult documentation to see how to install for 4.2. But for 4.1, you go to Edit, Preferences, click on your Add-ons tab, click Install. A file window will open and you just find the file you downloaded, whether it's Python or a zip file, and double click on it and it will appear right here. And if it doesn't, type it into the search bar, and yeah, when you see it here, you can enable it by clicking on this little square. So, okay, now the add-on is installed and is on, but before we get to the UI and the add-on itself, quick preferences overview of the important things. So two important settings are your Save Default Render Settings and Presets folder. Save Default Render Settings saves the current file, the settings for the current file, just so you can always revert back to it when you need to. Your preset folder, the add-on creates a folder by default, but it's kind of hard to find. It's an app data. I suggest you create your own, just so if you need to move presets around or have multiple folders, just so it's easy to navigate and is accessible. So yeah, that are the two important options. The rest of them I will go over a little later. So let's see how the add-on works. Where does it appear? It's gonna appear in your Render Properties tab. And by default, it appears somewhere down here after Bake for cycles. I like to have it on top because this is how I interact with my render settings now, mostly. So yeah, let's go over the UI. This is a collapsible options panel. And let's start with a Save New Preset. It does what it says it does. It saves your current settings as a preset. It saves render, output, view layer, camera, and compositor trees. So restore default settings. As we discussed in preferences menu, when you have your default settings saved, you can always come back here and click on it just to restore it in case you need it. Cycles and Eevee. There are your two filters. So when you click on Eevee, it's going to show you Eevee presets, and it's going to switch your render engine and cycles. But just to note, there is an option to turn this behavior off, and I'll explain why you would want that later. So let's go ahead and save a new preset. So when you click on Save New Preset, you're gonna have three fields. Only one is mandatory, and it's the preset name. So let's call it Test. Camera is your camera notes, something to make sure that you know what camera you're using. Let's call it IMAX 70. And notes are extra notes that you might need, just to remind yourself of what the preset does, if it does something special, what the compositor tree is like, or if you're working with other people, just to help them see how the preset works. So I'm gonna type in test text. Okay, so now you have the preset over here, and when you click on it again, it's disabled, and once you click on it, it's enabled. You see your notes when you hover over the render preset name, will show you the notes, and the camera icon, if you hover over it, will show you the name for the camera, but also it will also show you the focal length and the sensor size, just for convenience. And okay, so I'm gonna go over each button. What does it do? The render name is your main render settings. That includes everything in your render properties, in your output properties, and in your view layer properties. There's some exceptions to what does the add-on store, but you can look into the documentation to see those exceptions. Next, the camera icon. Well, it saves your camera settings, which are right here. Most of them are being saved, including depth of field or composition guides and passepartout and so on. Apply compositor, the next button. It applies if you do have a compositing node tree, it will apply it. Yeah, so that's your compositor icon. The next button I'm gonna go over in a bit. I'm gonna switch to my Blender file, and we'll go from there. Okay, and here we are. This is my version of Blender with a little scene just to show you the functionality. And let's go ahead and create a new preset. So let's say I want a vertical image for a social media promotion. Then I can go ahead, make it a vertical resolution, and save a new preset. Let's call it vertical camera test and notes vertical. Okay, so we have our second preset, and if you click on the preset we made previously, it's going to change right away. Let's go over a few things. First of all, let's say that I want to change a setting in a preset. Let's say I want my viewport min samples to be 64. When I do that, you notice something changes. The name becomes purple, which means it's modified. It doesn't match the setting that has been stored. When that happens, you have a few options. And this applies to everything. If you have your camera modified, it's going to show up purple, and compositor going to show up purple if compositor tree is modified. So you have a few options from here. You can overwrite, and when you click on overwrite, you can choose exactly what you want to overwrite: render settings only, camera settings only, or compositor only. In this case, we only changed the render settings, so we can actually click on entire preset and click OK. It's going to turn to blue, and our min samples are going to be 64 now. Let's go back to a different value. Let's go back to 0. And there's a button that's going to appear when a preset is modified. It's a revert button. And once you click on that, you're going to have the same options right here, but it's going to revert to the stored values. So if I click OK, it's going to go back to 64. And you're probably wondering, if I change the setting, let's go back to 0, how do I know what I have actually changed? Or if you've done it a while ago, you might forget. To see what you actually changed, if you don't have your console open, you can go to Window, toggle System Console, and once you open the console, you can see this text right here: non-matching key with the current value and the preset value. And this is exactly what has been changed. In this case, it's viewport min samples. The saved value is 64 and the current one is 0. That way you can keep track of what you have changed in a preset. So okay, I'm gonna switch one more time. I'm gonna switch to my presets and we'll go from there. And here we are in a rendered view now. And here are the presets. My presets, the same presets that come with the add-on if you purchased a higher tier version of the add-on. I'm gonna go over them really quickly. Here is a fast preset for draft renders. Here is noir film, high contrast, black and white, indie film with super 35, VHS with some distortions and low resolution. Maybe you want something cinematic and wide. Maybe you want an IMAX experience, or maybe you're making a YouTube animation, or making a story for a social media platform. Maybe it's a product photography project with high sample count and high resolution. Maybe it's a miniature. And the cool thing is that everything is independent. Let's say you picked an indie film, but you are not liking the camera you're using in a preset. Well, you can choose from any camera you have stored. So we can mix that with, let's say, Alexa 65. And maybe we're liking the render settings, but not really liking the compositing. We can switch it to, let's say, VHS compositing or noir compositing. Or maybe you want a really fast render, but you still want some cool looks and different cameras and so on and so forth. The possibilities are endless. Feel free to experiment, and hopefully the experimentations will help you make your artistic decisions and help them be better. So yeah, this is the basic overview, and we're gonna go into some organization tools now. Okay, let's go over organization tools. So you will see this grease pencil button appear. If you click on it, you're gonna have some extra buttons appear to the right of the preset. Well, the first one is a rename button, which lets you change your notes and rename the preset. The up and down arrow buttons, they just change the order. And the X button deletes the preset. When you click on it, you're gonna see a confirmation window if you do want to delete the preset. Okay, and that's the organization tools. And now let's move on to preferences, which you can always access through the settings button on top right that has all the settings you can change on the fly. But I'm gonna go over each setting now. Okay, let's go over preferences. And the first two I've already explained in the installation part of the video, so if you missed that, you can go back. But let's go over the auto apply settings, two that are checked when you install the add-on. As you could tell, when you click on a preset, I'm gonna hide this window, the preference window now. But when you click on a preset, everything changes, including the camera and the compositing. But maybe you don't want that. Maybe you want to play around. If you want to experiment, you can toggle them off. And they're independent. So let's toggle both of them off just so you can see. If you do that, it's just not going to change everything, right? So it's all independent again. But if you do have set presets, maybe auto applying is good, because you don't want to tinker around or click on every button, just one click and you have your entire preset on. Anyway, let's move to the compositor viewport, and that's just the way you see the compositing in your View 3D. The options are disabled, camera always, disabled, it doesn't show any compositing. Let me bring this up. Disabled doesn't show any compositing, camera shows only in camera view, and always shows it always. I do prefer camera. Again, if you're not using any compositing in Blender, you can disable it. But yeah, so let's move over to disable auto engine switch. And as I explained earlier, when you do change your filter to say Eevee, it's gonna change the render engine as well, just so you can keep track of which presets you're looking for. If you disable it, then it won't switch the render engine. And why is there an option for that? Is because let's say you're in Eevee, but you're using Eevee render settings if you're in Eevee, but you do want a compositor from the Cycles preset. Let's say you want a VHS, you created a VHS preset for Cycles, and you want to use the compositing or the camera in Eevee. You can just go back to Cycles and pick them, and they will apply. And that's the reason why disable out engine switch is, and it might be very useful for you. Okay, and let's go over the other options. A little more advanced, but a little more obscure, but let's go over them. Apply performance settings is actually very important. Applying performance settings, there's a few reasons why this exists, why this option exists. First of all, performance settings are pretty expensive to apply, especially when if it deals with threads. So there's an option to disable it. So your hardware is always the same. So you don't need to be applying them. But also, you might need it because let's say some of your presets are animation presets and you want persistent data on for some, and you have stills for which you don't need any persistent. You could be applying those settings. And again, the add-on is smart if your thread count doesn't change or your thread mode doesn't change, then it will not change them. So it will be pretty fast if you just have the persistent data on, let's say. But also this is important because if you're working with other people or a team, obviously not all hardware matches and everyone doesn't have the same computer. So you don't want to be applying performance settings just to make sure everything is consistent. Okay, and that's the performance settings option. Apply units. It does what it says it does. It applies units. Yeah. Are you working on a miniature one day? The next day you're working on a city render. Whatever, you can change your units between, and using the apply, you can apply those units within the preset. And to mention this, they're always stored. So if you saved a preset with millimeters, and then you chose not to apply them, they won't apply, but they're saved. So they're stored within the preset. So you can always toggle them back on when you need it with this setting. Apply my different versions of the add-on, but currently, and you can look into documentation to know exactly what it does. Currently, it changes the grid size and DOF in the viewport, depth of field in the viewport. This is more like experimental because it is tied to apply units. So if your unit scale is different, you might want a different grid size. So that's why I include those. But it doesn't mean you have to use them. Also, you must have View 3D window open or exist somewhere for it to actually get those settings. Very important because it's not going to give an error, but it's just not going to work if you don't have a View 3D, which is just your normal, like this, you seeing your work. That's the View 3D port. Yeah, right. That's 3D viewport, right? Okay. Let's apply other. Yeah. And remove warnings. It just removes the modify tag. And that there was this for a few reasons. Maybe you just don't want to be seeing that purple. Maybe it's distracting. Or if you're using some other add-ons that might cause issues, which are add-ons that also reset or alter the properties used by quick render presets, they might cause issues with like always showing up as modified, so you can remove that. A known issue that I have with a photographer add-on, which is one of my favorites. Shout out to photographer add-on. It's a must-have in my opinion, but it has an exposure setting that resets the exposure, which would cause like modified tags all over the place with the quick render presets add-on. Thankfully, Photographer has an option to not reset the exposure, so that's easily fixable if that's something you're experiencing. But if you have other problems with other add-ons, you can let me know, and maybe there are some solutions. But currently, the quick solution is just to remove the modified tags. So yeah, that's about it for the preferences. And again, you can access them right away from this little settings icon up here in the UI. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the quick render presets. I hope if you have that done, I hope you enjoy. If you don't, I hope you can see value in it. Maybe you don't, maybe you don't need this, maybe you do. I certainly do. That's why I made it for myself, because I switch between different projects quite often, and they require different settings and resolutions. And sometimes I want a really fast rendering, sometimes for storyboarding and drafting, for draft renders. But sometimes I just want to play around. Sometimes I want my final renders to be a certain way. So that's a really quick way to do this without having to tinker with countless render settings. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. I hope you have fun with your next project, and thanks for watching. See you around. Bye.